Okay, welcome back to the deep dive. This is where we take a stack of sources, articles, research, maybe something unexpected, and we pull out the essential knowledge, those surprising insights.
Yeah, and just enough context to really get you up to speed on a topic.
Think of it as getting the most important conversation points
W-
without, having to wade through everything yourself.
Exactly. We're your guides through the information landscape.
Absolutely. And today, our deep dive is into something a little different, but just as packed with insight, excerpts from a fictional source.
Hmm.
It's set in the year 2059.
Right. And it's about an off-planet law enforcement conference that, well, let's just say it goes spectacularly wrong.
It really does.
Yeah. And the setting is key here. The source tells us that by 2059, humanity has spread out, beyond Earth.
Living on crowded man-made worlds, satellites.
Mm-hmm. They've achieved incredible technological feats, but interestingly, they haven't left behind their fundamental human nature. As the source puts it, the skill and ability to create their own worlds hadn't stopped them from killing their brothers.
Sometimes subtly, sometimes violently, even back to something as primal as ramming a sharpened stick through another's heart.
Grim stuff.
Charming, yeah. So even in this expanded futuristic reality, crime persists. And that means justice is still needed, rules, organizations, manpower.
And apparently mandatory conferences to educate and inform.
Which brings us to our mission today, to unpack the layers of this seemingly straightforward professional event. Because these excerpts show it quickly spirals.
Oh, yeah. Into a complex case involving murder, hidden histories, deeply personal vendettas.
And it's all seen through the very unique lens of Lieutenant Eve Dallas.
Her perspective is really the engine driving this whole narrative, isn't it?
Totally.
The source uses her experiences to blend this futuristic setting, space travel, a luxury resort on Olympus, tech like drying tubes.
Those instant drying things.
Yeah, or telelinks for video calls. It blends all that with completely timeless human elements.
Like police work, damaged relationships, lingering trauma.
And revenge. The corrosive nature of revenge. It's that contrast that makes it so compelling, I think.
Definitely. Let's start there then with the future setting and specifically why Lieutenant Eve Dallas absolutely loathes it.
Well, the source paints a picture of Earth being so crawled with people that they spilled out to jam man-made worlds and satellites.
Right. This interstellar expansion requires systems of law and order.
But for Dallas, who is fundamentally rooted in the grime and reality of street-level police work, being forced into this environment is, well, it's pure torture for her.
Torture that includes, horrifyingly for her, attending and giving a seminar.
Oh, the seminar.
The source is almost gleeful in describing her aversion. She'd rather face a horde of torqued-out chemiheads.
That's their slang for aggressively high individuals, right?
Yeah. She'd rather face them than conduct a seminar on murder. Why? Because the chemiheads probably wouldn't embarrass you to death.
Exactly. Her assignment is described as mortifying, and the journey itself, aboard her husband Roarke's personal shuttle.
Which she sees as a fancy flying death trap.
Right. She's so uncomfortable with the idea of the flight home, she half-seriously thinks about just living out the rest of her life on Olympus.
It really underscores how grounded her character is, almost allergic to anything that takes her too far from concrete streets.
It's particularly striking when you see it contrasted with Roarke's absolute ease in this world.
Oh, completely. Their suite on Olympus isn't just nice, it's described as incredibly lavish. The bathroom is an oasis of sensual indulgence.
With a huge tub, a shower like a waterfall, and those mood/drying tubes.
Right. Roarke is energized by space travel, while Eve feels like her muscles and bones dissolve during landing.
He moves through this luxurious, futuristic space effortlessly.
While she's constantly slightly off balance, physically and emotionally.
Even getting dressed for the conference reception highlights this. Eve packed her usual practical clothes, but Roarke's majordomo, Somerset,
He made adjustments to her conference wardrobe.
and the result, the sheer flow of bronze dress.
Eve's immediate reaction, now I have to burn them.
It's a perfect detail from the source, showing her discomfort with anything that isn't strictly utilitarian or tactical.
And that sheer bronze dress, as it turns out, becomes an accidental accessory in a very messy situation.
Doesn't it just?
Because after surviving the flight and the wardrobe battle, Eve has to face the opening cocktail reception.
Which the source describes as huge and packed. Thousands of police officials, technicians, experts from all over the populated universe.
Eve dryly observes she's in a room with about 4,000 cops,
To which Roarke replies, with his usual wry humor, that he feels very safe.
which is a classic Roarke line, right? Loaded with irony given his past.
The source hints some of these guys probably tried to put you away once upon a time.
Amidst this crowd, a figure approaches who the source introduces as Commander Douglas Skinner.
Ah, Skinner, a legend of police lore.
He specifically seeks out Eve. Now, how does the source portray this interaction? What does Skinner actually say to her?
Well, he starts by saying he admires her work, calling her results unarguable.
Okay, seems positive at first.
But then he pointedly adds he doesn't always approve of her methods. Then he pivots,
How so?
suggesting a good cop, a smart cop, moves up the ranks and assesses that her ill-advised personal decisions have hindered her promotion potential.
That's a pretty thinly veiled reference to her marriage to Roarke, isn't it?
Absolutely. The source uses this conversation to establish Skinner's judgment of her based on her personal life, not just her professional achievements.
It's a subtle but important point about how reputation and personal choices can intersect with career, even in 2059.
But then he drops the real bombshell.
Oh, it's more than a bombshell. It's like an attempted ethical hand grenade. He doesn't just offer career advice.
No, he makes a direct proposition. He says he can get her a captaincy
If?
she helps him bring down Roarke, whom he dismissively calls a criminal.
Wow. That proposition is so completely misjudged, so fundamentally misunderstanding who Eve Dallas is.
Her reaction is immediate and intensely visceral, isn't it? The source captures it beautifully. She doesn't hesitate.
No hesitation at all. She calls him full of shit for even suggesting she'd betray Roarke.
And the source describes her leaning in close to whisper a warning that is pure Dallas.
Try it. You'll find out I'm no fucking nurturer.
It's a raw, defiant response. Shows where her true loyalties lie and how little patience she has for political maneuvering or threats against her life partner.
It highlights that core of her character. She's about justice, duty, sure, but her relationship with Roarke is non-negotiable.
Skinner completely underestimated that, and the immediate aftermath of this tense exchange turns physical, pulling her further into trouble.
Right. As she turns away, Skinner's bodyguard, Reginald Weeks, gets in her path.
Bad move.
Very bad move. The source describes Eve's reaction as immediate and purely reflexive. A short-arm jab to break his nose.
Just bash.
A split-second decision resulting in a small splatter of his blood on that distinctive sheer bronze dress. It's a physical manifestation of her refusal to be blocked or controlled.
A refusal that has immediate, tragic consequences, because shortly after that reception,
Reginald Weeks is found dead.
found in a stairwell between the 18th and 19th floors of the hotel.
And the scene is described as gruesome. Once pristine white walls were splattered with blood and gray matter. And chillingly, the body is face up, immediately identifiable as the man Eve just punched.
And her training immediately takes over, despite her prior altercation. She's already observing key details, right?
Instantly. As described in the source, didn't do this with fists. She notes the specific injuries. One side of his face is devastated, the other isn't. His left arm is crushed.
What does that immediately suggest to a trained eye, according to the source?
It points strongly to a specific method and target. Someone likely attacked a left-handed man with a weapon, focusing on one side.
And they find?
A metal bat is found on the scene, plus a small but crucial detail. A silver stud from a hotel security epaulette. Small clues that start to build a picture.
But even as her cop instincts kick in, she's acutely aware of the jurisdictional nightmare she's stepped into.
Especially given her prior involvement with the victim. She states it plainly. I don't have any authority here.
And that's when Chief Darcia Angelo of the Olympus Police arrives.
The source introduces her mid-event, apologizing for her appearance because she was also at a welcome reception.
Right. Her initial reaction is cold, professional, and very territorial about her crime scene.
Their initial dynamic is fascinating, isn't it? There's this immediate friction over authority and process.
Darcia questions Eve's initial examination, makes it clear she'll redo it.
And Eve, soaking wet and covered in grime from the scene, just hands Darcia the sealant. That's the police material they use to contain evidence.
Almost daring her to take charge.
And Darcia's pointed line, "You weren't ever in an official capacity in," really lays down the boundary.
It's Roarke, as the property owner, who has to step in.
Right, he asserts his right to request assistance, effectively legitimizing Eve's presence.
It's a power negotiation captured right there. Darcia explains her backstory: worked hard for 12 years in places like Colombia, barely making a living as a cop.
Before getting this relatively cushy job on Olympus.
She makes it clear she's a good cop, but homicide isn't her specialty. And while she doesn't necessarily enjoy sharing, she appreciates help.
So the friction gradually melts into a grudging professional cooperation.
But not before Darcia underscores the initial tension. "What was this dance about?" Her answer: "Simply, so you and I would both be aware it is my case."
She needed to establish turf. Understandable.
And in the middle of all this, Eve makes a crucial disclosure to Darcia, which instantly shifts the dynamics again.
You need to be aware that earlier tonight, I punched the dead man in the face.
Wow. Darcia's reaction is suspicious. Right. Asking why.
And Eve's blunt, unapologetic reply: "You got in my way."
Which forces Darcia to immediately view Eve, and by extension Roarke, as potential suspects, adds yet another layer to an already complex situation.
Okay, so with the victim identified as Reginald Weeks, an employee of Skinner's personal security firm?
The investigation pivots towards Commander Skinner and begins to trace a much older, deeper past.
Weeks's background check from the source shows he had a clean record. Former military, border patrol, worked for a security firm handling protection for a major political party.
As Eve notes, this paints a picture of someone who knows how to follow orders.
Reinforcing the idea that he was a tool or operative, potentially signaled by Skinner to provoke that incident with Eve.
But why? To understand why Skinner would do this, Eve and Roarke dig into his history.
And this involves Roarke using his formidable technical skills. The source says he manages to illegally block CompuGuard
Which sounds like a heavily protected interplanetary police data network.
and breaks into official data using his modified system.
It's a classic Roarke move, bending the rules for Eve's sake, and it yields the breakthrough.
Poring over Skinner's old case files, they find his obsession isn't new. It dates back 23 years to a case in Atlanta in 2036.
And a file under Captain Douglas Skinner lists a suspect: Roarke, Patrick, a.k.a. O'Hara, Sean, a.k.a. McNeil, Thomas.
Patrick Roarke, Roarke's father.
Yeah. And the charges listed in the source are significant: illegal weapons running, illegal entry, theft.
And critically, conspiracy to murder of police officers.
The source explains that Skinner headed the special unit tasked with taking down these arms dealers in Atlanta, but their operation was compromised.
A weasel on the inside had double-crossed them.
Skinner's men were killed in a firefight, and Roarke's father escaped.
Skinner's father, described by the source as a dickless coward and a pathetic drunk, a vicious, small-minded bully. He was the one who got away.
This revelation hits Roarke hard. The source includes his internal memories of his abusive father, describing himself as the favored recipient of his father's fists and boots.
Seeing his father's name linked to the death of cops, to the destruction of Skinner's life's work.
Elicits a quiet, chilling reaction from Roarke. Son of a bitch. It connects his personal trauma directly to the professional tragedy that defined Skinner.
And the picture comes into focus. Skinner's inability to close that case, the loss of his men, the failure to bring Roarke's father to justice. It festered for decades.
Became a consuming obsession. Since the father escaped final justice and is dead, Skinner has transferred that burning need for payment onto the son.
As Eve profiles Skinner, based on this history, she realizes, you're what's left of the single biggest personal and professional failure of his life.
Skinner sees Roarke not just as a criminal, but as the embodiment of his own professional failure and personal loss. He's trying to settle a 23-year-old score through the son.
And as the plot unfolds, we see this wasn't an isolated incident involving only Weeks.
No, the bodies start adding up. The investigation quickly links another victim back to that 2036 Atlanta tragedy.
Feeney, assisting with background checks, finds Zita Vinter, a hotel security employee.
And her father, Carl Vinter, was one of the Atlanta cops killed in Skinner's botched 2036 operation.
This immediately raises a red flag. Could Skinner be recruiting children of the fallen officers, perhaps manipulating them?
Using their shared history of loss.
Yeah. Even Roarke rushed to Zita Vinter's apartment to find her.
And this is where the source throws in another twist, confirming Zita isn't a simple victim.
As they approach her apartment, Roarke's security instincts sense something. Zita had rigged her door with an explosive device.
Designed to kill whoever was outside it, Roarke pulls Eve back just seconds before it blows.
Wow. A very near miss.
Which, as Eve and Peabody immediately realize, makes the idea of suicide highly unlikely, doesn't it?
Completely. They find Zita's body in her bed, presented almost peacefully with her arms crossed.
When Chief Angelo arrives, having been drenched by the sprinklers, the blast triggered.
Her initial assessment is suicide, based on a computer-generated note claiming guilt over Weeks' death and stating she was paid by Roarke.
The note even mentions using pills for painless, gentle self-termination.
But even Peabody, even soaked and shaken by the explosion, see multiple red flags in the source's description.
What are their counter-arguments?
Well, they point to the lack of any signs of struggle or distress on Zeta's body. The note is computer-generated, not handwritten, easy to fake. And crucially, the presence of that explosive device on the door, plus another device found near surveillance equipment she'd apparently sabotaged.
Completely contradicts the idea of a quiet, peaceful suicide. Why rig explosives if you just plan to take pills in bed?
Makes no sense. And then there's Roarke's psychological profile.
Peabody highlights that, right? It's completely inconsistent with hiring hits.
As she puts it, his profile is directly opposed to hiring out hits, especially since Dallas popped the guy, which is one of the things he admires about her.
So, despite Darcia's initial insistence, the evidence clearly points to Zeta Vinter being murdered.
She was another tool, or as Darcia later describes individuals caught up in this, a soldier, used and discarded by Skinner or someone working for him.
In this escalating plot of revenge.
The motivation for such calculated violence, using others as disposable assets, becomes terrifyingly clear when we learn more about Commander Skinner's condition.
Ah, yes. Dr. Mira, the profiler, facilitates a conversation with Belle Skinner, Douglas's wife.
And it's revealed that Skinner is terminally ill,
The source gives him a prognosis of only a year, perhaps only 3 months left.
with perhaps 2 at the outside where he'll continue to be mobile and lucid.
That's a clock ticking down, paints a picture of a man made desperate and, as the source suggests, likely more unstable, more fanatic, by his impending death and unresolved past.
Bell confirms his illness, his emotional distance, and his intense, consuming obsession with both Roarke and Eve.
Seeing Eve's marriage to Roarke as choosing the devil over duty.
And then Bell drops a pivotal secret, a detail that ties everything together.
A single indiscretion early in their marriage resulted in an illegitimate son.
Bryson Hayes, who is currently working as Skinner's personal assistant and bodyguard.
Wow. Skinner's right-hand man is his own unacknowledged son.
Bell describes Bryson as hard and cold-blooded, suggesting he might be trying to prove himself to a father who set standards that were too high, too harsh.
And Belle reveals a chilling conversation she overheard months prior between Skinner and Hayes.
Skinner said something had to be done, some payment made, whatever the cost, that there were times the law had to make room for blood justice, death for death.
Chilling. The source quotes him specifically discussing the Olympus resort, calling it built on the bones of martyred cops from his failed Atlanta operation.
And that he tasked Hayes with ensuring Roarke's destruction as his legacy to his son before he died.
There it is. The motive led bear, a twisted legacy of revenge.
A father passing on his consuming hatred and failed mission to his son, convincing him that blood justice is necessary.
This confirms Hayes as the likely killer of both Weeks and Vinter.
Using them as necessary losses or soldiers to achieve his father's dying wish to destroy Roarke by any means necessary.
With Hayes identified, Chief Angelo dispatches officers to apprehend him,
The attempt is made in the hotel lobby. Hayes spots them and flees.
triggering an immediate manhunt through the resort.
And the chase scene the source describes as chaotic and intense. Eve is in full pursuit, operating purely on instinct and training.
Vaulting rails crashing through bar kitchens.
Dealing with a disabled cook, droid Hayes knocks over. Hayes is firing a laser weapon, blasting through obstacles.
Ultimately escaping through a door he seals behind him.
Chief Angelo joins the chase, and her observations highlight Hayes' unexpected skill.
Cop instincts, she notes, acknowledging how difficult he'll be to catch on foot, especially in her conference shoes.
So Hayes is now loose, a dangerous fugitive on a crowded space station resort.
The strategy shifts to containment and prediction. They use Roarke's intimate knowledge of the resort's layout and computer systems for analysis.
Trying to predict Hayes' movements, though Roarke admits there are too many places for him to hide.
Feeney is brought in to block transportation off-site for at least 24 hours, trying to keep Hayes trapped.
It becomes a massive coordinated hunt involving Eve, Roarke, Angelo, and Feeney, splitting up areas of the resort.
And in a detail that perfectly captures Eve's singular focus when she's on a case.
She tells Peabody that if they don't catch Hayes tonight, Peabody will have to cover her scheduled seminar the next day.
The thought of the seminar, which she previously dreaded, completely vanishes under the weight of the actual hunt.
Totally focused.
As the manhunt progresses towards its climax, the tangled personal histories unearthed earlier circle back, suggesting an even deeper connection between the central figures.
Right. Roarke, digging further into Skinner's notes about his father's movements after the Atlanta bust.
Discovers Skinner believed Patrick Roarke might have spent time in Dallas, Texas.
Around the time Eve was found orphaned in an alley there?
As Roarke tells Eve, the source hints at a chilling possibility. The timing's right.
Both their fathers were petty criminals searching for the big score, and she was found in that Dallas alley just days after Skinner lost his father's trail.
It's a tidy, almost too neat circle, but the source presents it as a real possibility that their traumatic origins could be intertwined through their father's criminal pasts.
While they're processing this potential connection, they have one final, brief interaction with Commander Skinner.
He's visibly deteriorating, described as haggard, his skin was gray and pasty.
He admits contacting lawyers for Hayes, but acknowledges he made a serious error in judgment.
Roarke confronts Skinner, pointing out he can't live or die consumed by that hate from the past.
In a final act of venom, Skinner, weakening, reveals Hayes likely has an insider helping him.
And intends to target what Roarke cherishes most, meaning Eve.
As a dearer form of payment than simply killing Roarke, it's his final cruel thrust, knowing it will land precisely where it hurts Roarke most.
Moments later, Skinner collapses, his body finally giving out.
Having, as Roarke observes, seemingly let go of his reason to live, Eve calls for Dr. Mira, but the focus is already back on Hayes.
Now knowing Eve is the target.
Based on Skinner's warning, they realize Hayes would go for Eve where she was supposed to be, her scheduled seminar location.
Which, in a twist of fate due to the manhunt, Peabody is now covering for Eve.
They race to the conference room. Hayes is there. He's rigged and explosive.
Precisely timed to kill Eve and anyone else present, including Peabody.
The climax, as described in the source, is sudden and violent. Eve bursts in, sees Peabody behind the podium,
and tackles her out of the way just as the blast hits.
Eve, Roarke, who followed her, and Peabody are all caught in the explosion rolling across the stage amidst fire and debris.
Chaos.
Chief Angelo arrives on the scene amidst the wreckage, taking Hayes into custody.
Trying to take my collar, Dallas, she asks, having gotten the arrest, maintaining that professional boundary even in the aftermath.
Hayes, injured but captured, gives a chilling confession that echoes his father's twisted logic.
He killed Weeks and Vinter as necessary losses, soldiers in his private war.
Actions taken to honor his father and create a false narrative. His intention to kill Eve was his last gift to his dying father, knowing it would destroy Roarke.
His final words echoing his father's justification. There's no other choice. Command isn't required to explain. Shows how deeply ingrained the father's fanaticism was.
And Peabody. Despite Eve tackling her out of the direct blast zone, she's still in a rough state.
Gets in a few classic lines, though. Tells Eve she's got 2 heads, thinks she's gained some weight.
And has a nice concussion. A bit of dark humor that cuts through the intensity of the moment.
So, in the resolution presented in the sources, Hayes is in custody, likely headed for a mental facility given his warped perspective and actions.
Commander Skinner is either deceased or near death, his personal war concluded.
The case is closed, and the interplanetary deadlines, including the much-dreaded seminar, are met, albeit in the most unexpected and explosive way possible.
This deep dive, pulled from a fictional future, really unpacks some heavy, timeless themes through the lens of a police investigation.
Absolutely. The source powerfully illustrates the corrosive weight of the past, how blood speaks to blood, as Skinner put it.
And how unresolved vengeance and obsession can consume individuals and spill out violently, impacting innocent people.
It shows the cost of justice warped by personal pain, turning duty into a mandate for blood justice.
It also highlights the enduring contrast between duty and personal connection, how characters like Eve navigate those demands.
And how legacies, whether chosen like Eve, building her life with Roarke, or inherited and twisted like Hayes's, profoundly shape lives.
And through it all, you see the resilience of characters like Eve and Roarke. Their unwavering focus on justice for them, the victims caught in the crossfire.
And how their shared history and connection become their strength and literally save them.
It leaves you with a lot to think about, doesn't it? This story, set in a futuristic world of space travel and advanced tech.
Makes you wonder, how much are any of us truly defined by our history and the histories of those connected to us, like our parents?
Yeah, and what is the true cost of seeking justice or vengeance when that drive is twisted and poisoned by personal pain and obsession, centuries from Earth or not?
Questions that resonate no matter the century or the planet.
Thanks for joining us for this deep dive. We'll see you next time.